Behind me, the espresso machine hissed like an angry cat as I balanced 3 plates along my forearm, a skill perfected over 4 years of waitressing at Bellini's. The restaurant hummed with the typical Friday night crowd, businessmen loosening their ties after a long week, couples leaning close over candlelight, and the occasional tourist who'd wandered in from the rain-slicked streets of North Beach, San Francisco's Little Italy. Table 7 was still waiting on their tiramisu. From the kitchen pass, Marco called, "Emma," his voice barely audible over Pavarotti's tenor floating from hidden speakers. "Coming," I answered, forcing a smile despite the ache spreading across my lower back. My feet screamed with every step on the polished hardwood floor, 12 hours into a double shift. Long ago, the black non-slip shoes, mandatory uniform, along with the crisp white button-up and pencil skirt, had ceased to provide any comfort. I delivered the plates to table 12, a family with children who'd already spilled water twice. Then I hurried to collect the dessert. Endlessly, the night stretched before me. 3 more hours until I could return to my tiny studio apartment, where on my kitchen counter, bills waited in a neat, terrifying stack. Rent was due in 5 days, and I was still short by $200. The front door chimed, a gust of cold air sweeping through the restaurant, carrying the scent of rain and expensive cologne. Something in the atmosphere shifted, a sudden tightening, as if the air pressure had changed. Conversations dimmed. I didn't turn immediately, too focused on carefully placing the tiramisu in front of a silver-haired woman who barely acknowledged my existence. I heard Giacomo, the restaurant owner, exclaim with unusual deference, "Mr. Russo, what an unexpected honor." Finally, my curiosity got the better of me. I glanced toward the entrance and nearly dropped my serving tray. In the doorway stood 3 men. 2 were broad-shouldered figures in dark suits, their eyes scanning the restaurant with mechanical precision. But the man between them commanded attention. Tall, with shoulders that filled out an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, was swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble, all sharp angles and shadows. He wasn't conventionally handsome, too harsh for that, but powerful in a way that made everything else in the room fade to background noise. Giacomo was personally escorting them to the best table in the house, the corner booth partially hidden by a decorative wine rack that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entire restaurant. I'd seen important people seated there before, local politicians, tech billionaires, but never anyone who caused Giacomo's hands to tremble as he pulled out chairs. "That's Victor Russo," whispered Lily, another waitress who had materialized beside me. "Don't stare." "Who?" I asked, still watching as the man slid into the booth with feline grace, his security taking positions nearby rather than sitting. Her eyes widened. "You don't know?" "Owner of half the city, probably. Nobody really knows what he does, but everyone knows not to ask." She tugged my sleeve. "And nobody wants to serve his table. Guess who's up in the rotation?" My stomach dropped. "No, please. Switch with me. I'm exhausted, I can't. Giacomo's watching. Just don't screw up." She gave me a sympathetic pat before disappearing into the kitchen. I took a deep breath, straightened my already straight apron, and approached the table. Each step closer felt like walking deeper into dangerous waters, though I couldn't explain why. The man, Russo, was studying the wine list with casual indifference. Up close, I noticed his hands strong, with a thin scar across the knuckles of his right hand. A heavy platinum watch gleamed at his wrist. "Good evening," I said, proud that my voice remained steady. "Welcome to Bellini's. Can I start you with something to drink?" Dark eyes flicked up to mine, and the full force of his attention hit me like a physical blow. His gaze was assessing, almost predatory, as if he could read every worry, every fear, every secret I'd ever kept with a single look. I fought the urge to step back. "The 2010 Brunello di Montalcino," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft but carrying a note of authority that suggested he rarely needed to raise it to be obeyed. "And water. No ice." I nodded, writing it down unnecessarily. There was no chance I would forget his order. "Would you like to hear about our specials this evening?" "No." He closed the menu and handed it to me without looking at it again. "Bring the wine. Then I'll order." I escaped to the bar, my heart hammering against my ribs. The bartender, sensing my distress, raised an eyebrow. Russo wants the 2010 Brunello, I said. The bartender whistled low. $300 a bottle. Must be nice. He reached for a key that opened the temperature-controlled cabinet where they kept the most expensive wines. Don't spill it, he added with a wink. I carried the wine back with exaggerated care, conscious of every step on the now seemingly treacherous floor. Giacomo didn't fire me, though I spent the rest of my shift enduring his lectures and the pitying glances of my co-workers. By the time I locked my apartment door behind me at 1 a.m., I was too exhausted to even cry, collapsing fully clothed onto my bed. I awoke to knocking. Harsh, insistent knocking that pulled me from a dream of drowning in coffee. Sunlight streamed through the blinds I'd forgotten to close, and a glance at my phone showed it was just past 9 a.m. I never had visitors, especially not on Saturday mornings. The knocking came again. I stumbled to the door of my studio apartment, ran fingers through my tangled hair, and peered through the peephole. Two men in dark suits stood in the hallway, the same men who had flanked Victor Russo the night before. My heart stuttered. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but one of them looked directly at the peephole as if sensing my presence. Miss Chen, he called. Mr. Russo requests your presence. I cracked the door open, keeping the security chain engaged. Why? He'll explain himself. The man's face remained impassive. A car is waiting. I'm not going anywhere, I said, fear giving my voice a sharpness I didn't feel. I have work at noon. Your employer has been informed you won't be coming in today. He handed me a business card through the crack in the door. It was heavy card stock, embossed with just a name and phone number. Call him if you don't believe me. My stomach twisted. Whatever power this man held, he'd used it to rearrange my life without my knowledge or consent. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That a rich man had sent his employees to invite me somewhere? That didn't sound like a crime, even if everything in me screamed danger. I need to change, I said finally. You have 15 minutes, the man checked his watch. We'll wait here. I closed the door, leaning against it as panic threatened to overwhelm me. I called Bellini's with shaking fingers. Emma, don't worry about it, Marco said when I reached him. Giacomo got a call from Mr. Russo's office this morning. Said you're helping with some event planning thing for him. Paid your full week's salary to Giacomo directly. You're covered. Event planning? I'd never planned an event in my life. Did they say when I'd be back? I asked, my voice small. Take all the time you need, apparently. Marco sounded impressed. Lucky break. Honestly, after last night, I thought you were done for. I hung up, more frightened than reassured. Russo had created a plausible cover story and ensured I wouldn't lose income, gestures that might seem generous if they weren't so calculated, and if I'd been given any choice in the matter. With no good options, I showered quickly and dressed in the nicest clothes I owned, dark jeans, a blue blouse, and a cardigan that had seen better days. I tied my long black hair into a neat ponytail, applied minimal makeup to hide the shadows under my eyes, and grabbed my purse and keys. The men escorted me downstairs to where a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb, drawing curious glances from my neighbors. The interior smelled of leather and the same expensive cologne I'd noticed last night. One of the men opened the rear door and I slid in, half expecting to find Russo himself waiting. Instead, the back seat was empty. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my apartment building recede in the window, a sense of foreboding settling over me. What could a man like Victor Russo possibly want with a waitress who'd spilled coffee on him? Revenge seemed petty for someone of his apparent status, but I couldn't imagine any benevolent reason for this summons. The SUV wound through the city, eventually climbing into the hills above the bay, where houses grew larger and further apart, hidden behind gates and hedges. We finally turned into a private drive, approaching an imposing set of wrought iron gates that opened silently at our approach. Beyond them, a winding driveway led to what could only be described as a modern fortress, a massive house of stone, steel, and glass perched on the hillside, offering what must be breathtaking views of the city and bay below. The car stopped at the front entrance where a woman in a tailored pantsuit waited. She looked to be in her 40s, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, tablet in hand. Miss Chen, she greeted me as I stepped out. I'm Diana, Mr. Russo's house manager. Please follow me. I followed her into a soaring entryway with marble floors and a curved staircase. The interior was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and strategic lighting highlighting what appeared to be museum-quality art. She led me through to a sun-filled room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Wait here, she instructed. Mr. Russo will join you shortly. When she left, I stood awkwardly in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything. The space felt curated rather than lived in, like a high-end hotel suite. I gravitated toward the windows, taking in the panoramic view of San Francisco spread out below. From this height, the city looked like a toy model, boats cutting white trails through the blue bay. Beautiful, isn't it? I whirled around. Victor Russo stood in the doorway, watching me. Gone was the formal suit from last night, replaced by dark trousers and a light gray cashmere sweater that somehow made him look more intimidating rather than less. In daylight, I could see his eyes were a deep brown, almost black, framed by lashes that seemed unfairly thick for a man. Why am I here? I asked, deciding directness was my only defense. He moved into the room with that same fluid grace I'd noticed before, like a predator conserving energy. Straight to the point. I appreciate that. He gestured to a seating area. Please. Sit. I remained standing. I'd prefer if you answered my question. A smile touched his lips, genuine this time, as if my defiance amused him. I have a proposition for you, Emma Chen. One I think you'll find difficult to refuse. My throat went dry. A proposition? I echoed, the words sounding ominous in the cavernous space. Sit, he repeated, this time with an edge that made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. He lowered himself into an armchair, his movements controlled and precise. I perched on the edge of the sofa across from him, poised to run, though I had nowhere to go. My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited for him to continue. I assume you're curious why you're here, he said, studying me with unnerving intensity. Most people in your position would be. In my position? I managed. Someone who's caught my attention. A chill ran down my spine. Because I ruined your suit. That hint of a smile again. The suit is replaceable. My tailor has already been notified. He leaned forward slightly. I did some research on you last night, Emma. 26 years old. Parents deceased. Car accident when you were 19. Art school dropout due to financial constraints. 4 different addresses in the past 5 years, each apartment smaller than the last. Currently 3 months behind on student loans, and, he glanced at his watch, 5 days from eviction if your rent check bounces again. I felt the blood drain from my face. How did you? Information is a commodity like anything else. He waved a hand dismissively. What interests me is that despite your circumstances, you have no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. You work double shifts at a restaurant where customers rarely remember your name. You send money every month to your younger brother at UC Berkeley. Money you can't afford to give. The mention of my brother sent a spike of fear through me. Leave Michael out of whatever this is. Russo's expression softened fractionally. I have no interest in your brother, except to note your loyalty to him. It speaks to your character. A woman entered with a tray of coffee and placed it on the table between us. I stared at the liquid, remembering last night's disaster, unable to appreciate the irony. I need someone trustworthy for a particular role, Russo continued once we were alone again. Someone without connections to my usual circles. Someone who wouldn't appear on anyone's radar. What role? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He poured coffee into 2 delicate porcelain cups. I need a fiancé. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Excuse me? A fiancé, he repeated calmly, offering me a cup, which I didn't take. For appearance purposes only, of course. You want to pretend to be engaged, I said slowly. To me. The absurdity of the situation momentarily overwhelmed my fear. Why would someone like you need a fake fiancé? Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps, though not directed at me. My reasons are my own. What matters is what I'm offering in return. He set down his cup and named a figure that made me gasp audibly. That would be monthly, he clarified. For a minimum commitment of 6 months. All expenses paid, of course. You'd live here, have a clothing allowance, a car at your disposal. Your brother's tuition would be covered through graduation. My mind reeled. The amount he'd mentioned would clear all my debts and still leave more money than I'd ever had at once. But nothing came without strings, especially not from a man like this. What would be expected of me? I asked carefully. Attendance at social functions. Learning appropriate etiquette. Creating the convincing appearance of a woman in love. His gaze was clinical, assessing. Nothing physical. You would have your own suite in this house, your privacy respected. I frowned, skepticism cutting through my shock. If all you need is a woman on your arm, you could hire an actress. Someone beautiful, polished, someone who already knows which fork to use. For the first time, something like genuine amusement crossed his features. Precisely why you're perfect. No one would believe I'd choose a sophisticated socialite or model. My interest in someone like you, unpolished, ordinary, that would be unexpected. People are less likely to question the unexpected. His words stung even as I recognized their truth. I was ordinary, invisible to men like him under normal circumstances. Who exactly would we be trying to convince? I pressed. Business associates. Family. He sipped his coffee. My grandmother, specifically. She's dying. Pancreatic cancer. Her last wish is to see me settled. She worries about me. A muscle in his jaw tightened. I don't want her final months consumed with this concern. It sounded almost noble, if I squinted hard enough. Almost human. But something didn't add up. So you're doing this for your grandmother's peace of mind? I asked skeptically. His expression hardened. My motivations aren't your concern. Your answer, however, is yes or no, Emma. I stood abruptly, wrapping my arms around myself. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning, he said, rising as well. He towered over me, his presence filling the room. Diana will show you around, answer practical questions. My driver will take you home this evening. And if I say no? His eyes met mine, unflinching. Then you'll be driven home and we'll never see each other again. You'll receive compensation for today's inconvenience. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Emma. This conversation, everything about this arrangement, is confidential. I value my privacy. Breaching that would have consequences. The threat lingered in the air between us as he left. I remained frozen until Diana reappeared moments later, tablet in hand, professional smile firmly in place. Shall we begin the tour? She asked, as if showing potential fake fiancés around was a regular part of her duties. The next few hours passed in a daze as she led me through the mansion. My private suite, should I accept the offer, would include a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, a bathroom with a tub I could actually lie down in, a walk-in closet, and a sitting room with a balcony overlooking the gardens. Other areas included a gym, a pool, a cinema room, a library filled with books that appeared to have been read rather than chosen for their spines, and a kitchen where a private chef prepared all meals. Mr. Russo rarely uses most of these spaces, Diana explained as we walked through a formal dining room that could seat 20. He prefers his private office in the library. Does he live here alone? I asked, trying to build a picture of the man who had so thoroughly upended my Saturday. The household staff includes myself, the chef, 2 housekeepers, a groundskeeper, and security personnel. Mr. Russo's personal assistant works primarily from the downtown office but has rooms here when required. Her answer was polished, revealing nothing personal. No family? Friends? Diana's expression remained neutral. Mr. Russo values his privacy. As he mentioned, his social calendar is primarily business-related. By late afternoon, my head was spinning with information, schedules, security protocols, expectations for a woman in my potential position. Diana had been thorough but impersonal, treating the whole thing like a business arrangement, which I supposed it was. As promised, a driver took me home at sunset. I sat in the back of the same black SUV, watching the city lights emerge as we descended from the hills, feeling as though I'd stepped into someone else's life for a day. In my tiny apartment, everything looked shabbier than when I'd left. The constant drip of the bathroom faucet I couldn't afford to fix. The second-hand furniture. The walls thin enough that I could hear my neighbors arguing through them. On my kitchen counter, the stack of bills seemed to have multiplied in my absence. I called my brother, needing to hear a familiar voice. "Hey, Michael answered, the background noise suggesting he was at a cafe or the library. "What's up?" "Just checking in," I said, trying to sound normal. "How's the study group going?" Good. "We're prepping for midterms." He paused. "Everything okay? You sound weird." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Michael had no idea how precarious our situation was. I'd shielded him from that reality, insisting he focus on his education while I handled the finances. The money I sent each month barely covered his share of rent in the house he shared with 4 other students, but it was all I could manage. "Just tired," I lied. "Double shift yesterday." "You work too hard," he said, the concern in his voice making him sound older than 21. "Seriously, you should be painting, not serving pasta to rich jerks." The irony wasn't lost on me. Maybe someday. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, head in my hands. 6 months pretending to be in love with a dangerous, powerful man I didn't know. 6 months living in a glass castle on a hill. 6 months of lies, but also financial security. My brother's education guaranteed. Maybe even a chance to save enough to return to art school myself someday. I barely slept that night, tossing between nightmares of drowning and coffee and dreams of painting again, my hands free from the constant tremor of exhaustion. Morning came with grey light filtering through my blinds and a decision settling in my chest like a stone. I showered and dressed with care, choosing a simple black dress I'd worn to my parents' funeral, the only formal attire I owned. The knock came precisely at 9 o'clock. The same driver, the same car. This time when we arrived at the mansion, Russo was waiting in the same sunlit room, looking out at the view, hands clasped behind his back. He turned as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Your answer?" he asked without preamble. I took a deep breath. "Yes. But I have conditions." Something like respect flickered across his face. "Name them." "I want everything in writing. The payment amounts, duration, expectations." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "My brother remains off limits. No research, no contact, no involvement of any kind." He nodded. "Reasonable. Anything else?" "When this ends, it ends completely. No lingering obligations, no contact." "Agreed," he said. Then added, "I have conditions of my own." "I assumed you would." He gestured to the sofa, and this time I sat a day. He remained standing, perhaps to maintain the power dynamic. "You will be convincing in your role," he began. "You'll learn what you need to know about me, my business interests, how someone in your position would behave. You'll dress, speak, and conduct yourself appropriately for someone associated with me." I nodded slowly. "You will not access areas of the house designated as private. You will not attempt to gather information about my business dealings. You will not form independent relationships with my associates." His tone hardened. "And you will not, under any circumstances, speak to the press or discuss our arrangement with anyone during or after." The terms felt restrictive, controlling, but not unexpected. "When do we start?" I asked. "We already have." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This makes it official." He opened it to reveal a diamond ring that caught the sunlight, fracturing it into tiny rainbows across the ceiling. The stone was large but not ostentatious, set in platinum with smaller diamonds flanking it. "Your grandmother will believe you bought this specifically for me?" I asked dubiously. "My grandmother will believe I found someone who makes me happy." He removed the ring from its box. "Your hand, Emma." Hesitantly, I extended my left hand. His fingers were warm and surprisingly gentle as he slid the ring into place. It fit perfectly, which should have been impossible. "How did you know my size?" I asked, staring at the foreign object now adorning my finger. The same way I knew everything else. His voice was matter-of-fact. Information is power. A shiver ran through me at the reminder of how thoroughly he'd investigated my life in less than 24 hours. We have work to do, he continued. Diana has arranged for a stylist this afternoon. You'll need an appropriate wardrobe. Tomorrow, an etiquette consultant will begin your training. He checked his watch. I have meetings downtown, but I'll return for dinner. We should begin establishing our narrative. Our narrative. How we met. Fell in love. The proposal. His expression remained businesslike. Details matter, Emma. The more specific, the more believable. With that, he left me alone in the vast room, the weight of the ring unfamiliar on my hand. I stared out at the city below, at the life I'd known now seeming as distant as the tiny cars moving along ribbon-like streets. Whatever I had just agreed to, there was no going back. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The stylist brought racks of clothing for fittings, dresses, suits, casual wear, all in muted, expensive fabrics. The etiquette consultant, a former diplomat's wife, drilled me on everything from table settings to proper forms of address. A discreet security briefing outlined protocols I was expected to follow, never posting on social media, never traveling without approved security, never answering questions about Rousseau's business. Through it all, I saw little of my supposed fiancé. He left early, returned late, and our interactions were brief, clinical exchanges of information rather than the getting-to-know-you conversations normal couples might have. Until the fifth night, when Diana informed me, Mr. Rousseau requested your presence for dinner in the main dining room at 8. I dressed in one of my new outfits, a simple navy dress that cost more than 3 months of my former rent, and made my way downstairs, my stomach knotting with apprehension. The dining room was lit with candles, the long table set for 2 at one end. Rousseau stood when I entered, a gesture so old-fashioned it momentarily caught me off guard. Emma, he said, and for the first time, he looked almost uncertain. Thank you for joining me. As I took my seat, I realized this wasn't just dinner. This was the beginning of our performance, the first scene in a play neither of us had written, but both had agreed to star in. And from the intensity in his dark eyes as he studied me across the candlelight, I sensed the real show was about to begin. The chef served a meal that would have cost a week's salary at Bellini's, delicate scallops, roasted duck with cherry reduction, seasonal vegetables in preparations I couldn't name. I ate carefully, hyper-aware of my posture, the placement of my silverware, the small sips of wine as the etiquette consultant had instructed. Rousseau watched me with that same unnerving intensity, as if cataloguing every movement. You're a quick study, he commented after the main course was cleared. I've had practice adapting to new environments, I said, setting my napkin beside my plate. When my parents died, nothing was familiar anymore. You learn to observe, to mirror what others do. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps. Tell me about your art. The question startled me. How did you? Your brother mentioned it when I spoke with him. My blood ran cold. You spoke to Michael? After I explicitly agreed not to before our agreement. His voice remained calm. Reasonable precautions evolved. Yesterday afternoon I had him brought to my office downtown. Brought. The word hung between us, heavy with implication. Invited, he clarified, though the distinction seemed meaningless. I explained that you and I had met, that we'd become involved quickly, that your financial concerns were now being handled, including his education. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. And he believed that I'd suddenly fallen for a stranger and kept it secret. He was skeptical, Rousseau admitted, until I showed him this. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a photo of us in the garden, me looking up at him, sunlight in my hair, his hand on the small of my back. It was expertly photoshopped, capturing an intimacy that had never existed. You fabricated evidence, my voice was barely audible. To trick my brother. To protect our narrative, he corrected. Your brother is the person most likely to question your sudden change in circumstances. Now he won't. I pushed the phone back toward him, disgusted. Did you threaten him, too? There was no need for threats. He was concerned for you, naturally, but ultimately relieved about his tuition. Russo's eyes locked with mine. He asked if you were happy. I assured him you were. Anger flared, hot and unexpected. You had no right. I had every right, he interrupted, his tone sharpening for the first time. This arrangement only works with absolute commitment. Your brother is now part of our story, whether you like it or not. The dessert arrived, some elaborate confection of chocolate and berries that I couldn't bring myself to touch. We sat in tense silence until the staff withdrew. You're angry, he observed, swirling the ruby-colored wine in his glass. You manipulated my brother. Involved him without my consent. Yes, he didn't bother denying it. And I'd do it again. This isn't a game, Emma. People in my position have enemies. If our relationship isn't believed, those enemies might use you to get to me. Fear slithered down my spine. What kind of enemies? His expression closed like a gate slamming shut. The kind you don't want to meet. Because of your business. The business you won't discuss. I'm a businessman with interests in real estate, shipping, and private equity. The practiced answer rolled off his tongue. That's all I'm supposed to know. That's what I'm supposed to tell people when they ask what my fiancé does. I challenged. Yes. And they will believe you. Because most women in love don't question where the money comes from. His gaze was penetrating. Can you do that, Emma? Can you look into someone's eyes and lie convincingly? I met his stare directly. I'm sitting across from you, pretending I want to be here. What do you think? To my surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face, softening the hard edges, revealing a glimpse of someone younger, less burdened. Touché, he said, raising his glass slightly. Perhaps you'll be better at this than I anticipated. The tension between us eased fractionally. I took a small bite of dessert, the rich chocolate melting on my tongue. My grandmother wants to meet you, he said after a moment. Sunday brunch. She lives in Nob Hill. My stomach tightened. So soon. Her condition is deteriorating. The doctors give her 3 months, maybe 4. I nodded slowly. What should I know about her? Eliza Russo. 82. Widowed 20 years. She was born in Sicily but came to San Francisco as a child. Traditional in many ways, but not as conventional as you might expect. His voice softened when he spoke of her. She'll ask about your family, your background. We should align our stories. How much of the truth should I tell? As much as possible. Lies are easier to maintain when they're close to the truth. For the next hour, we constructed our fictional romance. How we'd met at a charity event rather than Bellini's. How he'd been drawn to my authenticity. How I'd been hesitant but ultimately won over by his persistence. The proposal had been private, at sunset on the terrace overlooking the bay. Romantic but believable. As the fabricated details accumulated, I found myself watching his hands as he spoke, the way they moved with precision, the slight scar across his knuckles catching the candlelight. I wondered how he'd gotten it, what other marks his body carried beneath the expensive clothing, what stories they might tell about the man behind the calculated exterior. You're staring, he observed, interrupting my thoughts. I flushed, embarrassed at being caught. I was thinking that for this to work, I should know more about you. Real things, not just the story we're telling others. He considered this, then nodded. A reasonable request. What would you like to know? I chose my questions carefully. Do you have siblings? A younger sister, Sophia. She lives in Europe with her husband. We're not close. His answer was clipped, suggesting a story he wasn't willing to share. Parents. My father died when I was 17. My mother remarried and lives in Phoenix. We speak occasionally. Again, the brevity hinted at complicated relationships. I tried a different approach. What do you do when you're not working? Hobbies, interests. Something like amusement crossed his face. You think I have hobbies? Everyone has something. He was quiet for a moment. I box 3 mornings a week with a former champion. I read history, primarily. And I collect art, though I suspect you've noticed that. I had. The house was filled with museum-quality pieces, abstract expressionists, modernists, a few classical landscapes. The Rothko in the library, I said. Is it real? His eyebrows lifted slightly. You know Rothko? I was an art student, remember? The reminder felt bitter on my tongue. Before I had to drop out. Yes, it's authentic. He studied me with renewed interest. What medium did you work in? Oils, mainly. Some mixed media. I looked away, the memory of creating art still raw, like pressing on a bruise. It doesn't matter now. It matters if it's important to you. The unexpected gentleness in his voice made me look up. For a moment, his expression seemed almost compassionate before the mask of cool control slipped back into place. There's a studio on the 3rd floor, he said, rising from the table. It's not used. It could be yours if you wish. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his face hardening. I have to take this. We'll continue tomorrow. He left me sitting alone in the vast dining room, the candles burning low, wondering if the brief moment of humanity I'd glimpsed had been real or just another calculated performance. The next morning, Diana showed me to the studio, a large room with windows facing north for optimal light, empty except for basic furniture and dusty easels. It must have been used once, though Russo hadn't mentioned by whom. Mr. Russo has authorized me to order any supplies you require, she said, tablet already in hand. Just provide a list. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, leaving tracks in the dust. Why is he doing this? Diana's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something like sympathy. Mr. Russo has his reasons for everything he does. It's not my place to question them. She hesitated, then added, but he's a man of his word. Whatever arrangement you've made, he'll honor it. After she left, I stood in the empty space, imagining it filled with canvases, the scent of turpentine and linseed oil, the possibility of creating again after so long. It felt like a dangerous gift. Another chain binding me to this arrangement, to this house, to him. The week passed in a blur of preparations. A personal shopper brought more clothing specifically for meeting Russo's grandmother. Hair stylist, manicurist, makeup artist. I was being transformed, polished like a rough stone, my edges smoothed away. Victor, I'd begun thinking of him by his first name, necessary for the illusion we were creating, was rarely present. When he was, we rehearsed our story, adding details, ensuring consistency. Each session felt like building a character for a play, except the stage was real life and there would be no curtain call. Sunday arrived with fog rolling over the bay, shrouding the view from my windows. I dressed carefully in a knee-length cream dress with a cashmere cardigan, modest, elegant, the type of outfit a grandmother would approve of. The diamond ring felt heavier today, its presence a constant reminder of the performance ahead. Victor was waiting in the foyer, dressed more casually than I'd seen him yet, tailored trousers and a navy sweater that softened his imposing figure. He assessed me with a critical eye. You look appropriate, he said, which I assumed was as close to a compliment as he offered. Remember, my grandmother is perceptive. She'll be watching how we interact. I know my role, I replied, trying to mask my nervousness. The drive to Nob Hill was silent, tension building with each block. The security detail, 2 men in the front seat, kept their eyes on the road, but I felt their awareness of every movement, every word. Victor's grandmother lived in a historic mansion from San Francisco's golden era, smaller than his modern fortress but exuding old-world elegance. As we approached the entrance, Victor took my hand, his grip firm, warm. The simple contact sent an unexpected shiver through me. Ready? He asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He squeezed my hand once, reassurance or warning, I couldn't tell, before we entered. The interior smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. A housekeeper led us through to a sunroom at the back of the house where a small, elegant woman sat in a wingback chair, wrapped in a fine cashmere blanket. Despite the room's warmth, her white hair was perfectly coiffed, her posture regal, but I could see the illness in her translucent skin, the slight tremor in her hands. Nonna, Victor said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. He crossed the room and bent to kiss her cheek. How are you feeling today? Better now that you're here. Her voice was accented but clear, her eyes sharp as they moved from him to me. And this must be the woman who's finally captured my grandson's heart. Victor beckoned me forward. Emma Chen, this is my grandmother, Eliza Russo. I stepped closer, offering my hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Russo. She ignored my hand and instead reached for my face, cool fingers touching my cheek. Let me look at you, dear. I stood still under her scrutiny, aware of Victor watching us both. Beautiful, she pronounced finally. Not in the obvious way of those models you use to escort, Vittorio. Something more interesting here. She patted the seat beside her. Sit. Tell me how you met my impossible grandson. For the next hour, we performed our carefully rehearsed story. I spoke of the charity event, the persistent courtship, my initial reluctance. Victor added details, his hand occasionally covering mine, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a gesture that appeared loving to observers but felt like a reminder of our contract. Eliza watched us with those keen eyes that missed nothing. And what did your family think, Emma, about this whirlwind romance? My parents passed away several years ago, I said, the truth easier than fiction. But my brother, Michael, has met Victor. He was surprised, but supportive. Surprised, she repeated with a knowing smile. I imagine so. My grandson is not known for commitment. She turned to Victor. How many women have you brought to meet me in all these years, Vittorio? None, he admitted. None, she echoed, satisfaction in her voice. She reached for my hand, examining the ring. My husband's mother's diamond. I wondered if I would live to see it on someone's finger again. I glanced at Victor, startled. He hadn't mentioned the ring was a family heirloom. His expression remained neutral, but I sensed tension in the set of his shoulders. It's beautiful, I said, feeling suddenly like an imposter, which, of course, I was. It belongs on the hand of a woman who loves my grandson for himself, not his bank accounts. Her gaze was piercing. Do you love him, Emma Chen? Truly. The directness of the question caught me off guard. I felt Victor stiffen beside me, though his face betrayed nothing. I looked at him, really looked, at the strong profile, the hint of silver at his temples, the careful control he maintained at all times. Then I turned back to his grandmother, a dying woman whose final wish was to see her grandson happy. I do, I said softly. The lie was easier than expected. He's not an easy man to know, but once you do. I let my voice trail off as if overcome with emotion I couldn't express. Eliza's face softened, her eyes misting. Good. That's good. She patted my hand. He needs someone who sees beyond the walls he builds. After brunch, as we prepared to leave, she asked to speak with Victor privately. I waited in the foyer, examining family photographs arranged on an antique table. Victor as a solemn child, a teenage girl who must be his sister, an older man with Victor's eyes and jawline who I assumed was his father. When Victor returned, his expression was unreadable, but something had shifted. He was quieter on the drive home, lost in thoughts he didn't share. Back at the mansion, as we entered the foyer, I finally broke the silence. Did she believe us? He stopped, turning to face me. Yes. Good. I moved to step past him, but he caught my arm, his grip gentle but firm. You were convincing, he said, studying my face. Perhaps too convincing. Isn't that what you wanted? A perfect performance. His eyes searched mine, looking for something I couldn't name. What did you mean about me not being easy to know? I hadn't prepared that line. It had come spontaneously in the moment. It seemed like something a woman in love with you might say. He released my arm, something like disappointment crossing his features. Of course. Well done, then. As he turned away, I caught a glimpse of unexpected vulnerability beneath the armor he wore so completely. A fracture in the perfect control that made me wonder for the first time what Victor Russo might be hiding, not from the world, but from himself. The days that followed settled into an uneasy routine. Victor left early each morning for his downtown office, returning late most evenings. We shared occasional meals where we refined our fabricated history and discussed upcoming events where I would make my debut as his fiancée. Our conversations remained largely impersonal, though sometimes I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. I spent my days in the studio he'd provided, which had been stocked with everything I could have asked for. Premium paints, brushes, canvases of every size. At first, I just sat there, overwhelmed by the possibilities after years of creative drought. Then, hesitantly, I began to sketch simple studies of the view from the windows, still lifes of fruit from the kitchen. Gradually, the familiar movements returned, muscle memory taking over as I lost myself in the work. One evening, 3 weeks into our arrangement, I was in the studio when I sensed a presence behind me. I turned to find Victor in the doorway, watching silently. I hadn't heard him come in. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked, setting down my brush. "A few minutes." His eyes moved from me to the canvas where I'd been working on a cityscape, San Francisco shrouded in fog, buildings emerging like islands from a gray sea. "You're talented." "I'm rusty," I corrected, suddenly self-conscious. "It's been years." He stepped into the room, approaching the canvas with the same careful assessment he seemed to apply to everything. "You capture the solitude of the city. The isolation, even among millions." His observation surprised me. Not just that he'd noticed, but that he'd articulated exactly what I'd been trying to convey. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. He glanced around at the other canvases I'd completed. "Mostly studies. Nothing fully realized yet. You should have a proper exhibition when you have enough work." I laughed, the sound strange in the quiet room. "Right. Unknown Waitress finally paints again. I'm sure galleries will be lining up." "You underestimate the influence of the Russo name," he said, not boasting, simply stating a fact. As my fiancé, doors would open. The reminder of our arrangement, of my role as an accessory to his life, cooled the momentary warmth between us. "Is there something you needed?" I asked, wiping paint from my hands with a cloth. "Yes. We have an event tomorrow night, the annual gala for the Pacific Art Foundation. My family has been patrons for generations." He seemed to choose his next words carefully. "It will be your first public appearance as my fiancé. Many important people will be there. Business associates, social connections." The anxiety must have shown on my face because he added, "You'll be fine. Just remember what you've learned. And if I make a mistake..." The memory of spilled coffee flashed through my mind. "You won't." His confidence was absolute. "Diana will brief you on who's who tomorrow. The car will be ready at 7. He turned to leave, then paused. "Wear the blue dress. The one with the low back." After he left, I stared at the canvas, my earlier creative flow disrupted. Tomorrow would be the real test. Not just convincing a loving grandmother, but an entire room of San Francisco's elite. People who would scrutinize every word, every gesture between us. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in the luxurious bed that still didn't feel like mine, rehearsing imaginary conversations, picturing all the ways I could expose our charade. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes, requiring the skilled administrations of the makeup artist Diana had arranged. The day passed in a blur of preparations, hair, makeup, final adjustments to the dress Victor had specified. It was midnight blue silk that flowed like water, modestly cut in front but dramatically dipping in back, revealing more skin than I was comfortable showing. When I was finally ready, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, polished, elegant, a convincing partner for a man like Victor Russo. He was waiting at the bottom of the grand staircase when I descended, his back to me as he checked his watch. At the sound of my approach, he turned, and for a fleeting moment, surprise registered on his face before his usual control reasserted itself. "You look," he paused, seeming to search for the appropriate word, "suitable." Despite myself, I felt a flicker of disappointment at the clinical assessment. "Thank you. You clean up nicely yourself." It was an understatement. In his perfectly tailored tuxedo, Victor was striking, powerful, commanding, undeniably handsome in a dangerous way that would turn heads even without his reputation. His mouth curved slightly at my comment. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fine fabric of his jacket. The security detail was waiting outside, 2 men in front, 2 behind. A protocol Victor had explained was non-negotiable for public events. The drive to the museum where the gala was being held was tense with anticipation, Victor using the time to give last-minute reminders about key attendees. Remember, he said as we approached our destination, tonight isn't just about appearances. There are people attending who might use any perceived weakness against me. Against us. Weakness? I echoed. His eyes met mine, intense in the dim light of the car. Sentiment can be exploited, Emma. Be careful what you reveal. Before I could ask what he meant, we'd arrived. Camera flashes greeted us as we exited the car, local press documenting the arrivals of San Francisco's wealthy and powerful. Victor's hand settled at the small of my back, a possessive gesture that sent an involuntary shiver along my spine. His touch was warm against my exposed skin, firm as he guided me past the photographers and up the museum steps. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed with dramatic lighting, floral arrangements, and art installations. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres while a string quartet played in the corner. The crowd was exactly as I'd imagined, women dripping in jewels, men in expensive suits, an air of privilege as palpable as the perfume. Victor led me through the room, his hand never leaving my back. We were approached immediately, people gravitating toward him like moths to a flame. He made introductions smoothly, his public persona more charming than I'd seen in private, smiling, occasionally even laughing at the right moments, though the warmth never quite reached his eyes. Victor, you've been keeping secrets, said a silver-haired man with the ruddy complexion of someone who enjoyed fine dining too much. Where have you been hiding this lovely creature? Some treasures are worth keeping to oneself, Senator, Victor replied smoothly. Emma, this is Senator James Barton. I smiled and extended my hand as I'd been taught. It's a pleasure, Senator. The pleasure is all mine, he replied, holding my hand a beat too long. And how did you two meet? I don't recall seeing you at these functions before. I recited our practiced story, watching the senator's face for any sign of disbelief. But he simply nodded, apparently accepting that Victor Russo had fallen suddenly, deeply in love with an unknown woman from outside his social circle. As the evening progressed, I met dozens more people. Business partners, social acquaintances, rivals thinly disguised as friends. I smiled until my cheeks ached, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, deflected personal questions with practiced ease. Through it all, Victor remained close, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. You're doing well, he murmured during a brief moment alone, his lips close to my ear, sending another involuntary shiver through me. Everyone keeps looking at us, I whispered back. Like they're waiting for something. They are, he said, his eyes locked with mine. They're waiting for the facade to crack. For some indication that this isn't real. Don't give them that satisfaction. A woman approached, tall, willowy, with the kind of effortless beauty that suggested good genes and better surgeons. Victor, she purred, air-kissing his cheek. How lovely to see you, Sophia, he replied, an undercurrent in his voice I couldn't interpret. I didn't expect you to be in town. Surprise, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? My fiancé, he corrected, his arm sliding around my waist. Emma, this is my sister, Sophia Russo d'Aqua. I managed to hide my shock. Victor had mentioned his sister lived in Europe with her husband. He hadn't said she'd be here tonight. Fiancé, Sophia's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. How unexpected. And fast. When you know, Victor replied, the cliché sounding strange from his lips. Sophia's assessing gaze raked over me. And where exactly did you meet my brother, Emma? He's notoriously private about his personal life. I repeated our cover story, maintaining eye contact despite her obvious skepticism. How romantic, she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. And what did you do before becoming the future Mrs. Russo? I was a waitress, I answered honestly, my chin lifting slightly. At Bellini's in North Beach. Her laugh was like glass breaking, sharp, brittle. A waitress. Of course. She turned to Victor. Mother will be thrilled. She always hoped you'd follow father's example and marry someone. Colorful. The barb hung in the air between us. Victor's arm tightened around my waist. Emma is an artist, he said, his voice cool. Quite talented. Perhaps if you're in town long enough, You could see her work. Sophia's smile thinned. Perhaps. Though Alessandro and I are leaving tomorrow. Just a quick business trip. She glanced over her shoulder. Speaking of, I should find my husband. Lovely to meet you, Emma. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. Family is so important to Victor. As she glided away, I felt Victor's tension radiating through his body. You didn't tell me your sister would be here, I said quietly. I didn't know. His expression had hardened, the public charm evaporating. Sophia has her own agenda. Always. She doesn't seem thrilled about our engagement. My sister's approval isn't relevant. He guided me toward the bar. She and I have complicated history. Before I could ask what he meant, we were intercepted by a tall man with salt and pepper hair and watchful eyes. Unlike the other guests who approached with obvious agendas, this man simply nodded to Victor with something like grudging respect. Russo. Detective Sullivan, Victor replied, his posture subtly changing, more alert, guarded. I didn't expect to see you here. Fundraising efforts extend to all public servants these days. The detective's gaze shifted to me. And this must be the fiancé I've heard about. Victor's introduction was terse. Emma, this is Detective Michael Sullivan, San Francisco Police Department. The detective extended his hand, his grip firm. Congratulations on your engagement, Miss Chen. Quite the whirlwind romance, from what I hear. Something in his tone, the slight emphasis on whirlwind, sent a warning prickling along my spine. The best ones often are, I replied, forcing a smile. And how are you enjoying life with Mr. Russo? His eyes never left mine, assessing, probing. Quite a change from waiting tables, I imagine. The casual mention of my former occupation confirmed my suspicion. He'd been investigating me. Investigating us. Change can be good, I said carefully. Indeed, his smile didn't reach his eyes, though rapid changes sometimes indicate instability. Victor's hand settled on my lower back again, a subtle reminder of his presence. Was there something specific you wanted, detective, or are you simply enjoying the canapés? Sullivan's attention shifted back to Victor. Just making conversation. Always interesting to see who attends these functions. He nodded to someone across the room. Enjoy your evening. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon. As he walked away, I felt a tremor start in my hands. Is he? Victor cut me off, his voice low. We're being watched. He led me smoothly onto the dance floor where other couples were already moving to the string quartet's waltz. His hands settled at my waist, the other taking mine as he drew me close. I followed his lead, grateful for the dance lessons Diana had arranged. The detective, I whispered, my lips close to his ear. Is he investigating you? Sullivan has been trying to build a case against me for years, he replied, his breath warm against my hair. Without success. A case for what? I pulled back slightly to see his face. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. You don't want to know. I think I do, I said, if I'm involved. His jaw tightened. You're not involved. You're playing a role. Remember, anything beyond that is not your concern. The dismissal stung more than it should have. Right. Just the pretty accessory on your arm, asking no questions. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps, or frustration. His fingers tightened on my waist. This isn't a game, Emma. These people, Sullivan included, are dangerous in ways you can't understand. Then help me understand, I challenged, keeping my voice low. You brought me into this world. At least tell me what I'm facing. The music swelled as he guided me in a turn, our bodies moving in perfect synchronization despite the tension between us. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then his expression shifted, resolve hardening his features. My father didn't simply die, he said finally, his voice barely audible over the music. He was murdered. In front of me. I was 17. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Sullivan was a rookie cop on the case. He's been obsessed with my family ever since. His eyes held mine, intense, unblinking. There are sides to this city you've never seen, Emma. Powers and interests that operate in shadows. My father crossed the wrong people. I've spent my life ensuring I never make the same mistake. We continued to dance, his revelation hanging in the air between us. I studied his face, the hard lines, the carefully controlled expression, and suddenly saw the 17-year-old boy beneath watching his father die, hardening himself against a brutal world. "I'm sorry," I said finally, the words inadequate but sincere. His expression softened fractionally. "Now you understand why this charade is necessary. Why appearances matter. Weakness gets exploited. Always." As the music ended, he drew me closer than necessary, his lips brushing my temple in what would appear to observers as an intimate gesture between lovers. "Trust no one here," he whispered. "Not even me." With that cryptic warning, he led me from the dance floor, his hand possessive at my back, his public smile firmly in place as we rejoined the glittering, dangerous crowd. The ride home from the gala was silent. The weight of Victor's revelation settled between us. His face was cast in shadow, his profile illuminated only by passing streetlights as he stared out the window, lost in thoughts he didn't share. The security detail seemed more alert than usual, one man constantly checking the mirrors, the other scanning side streets as we wound through the city. Something had shifted tonight, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what or when. When we arrived at the mansion, Victor finally spoke. "Come to my study." It wasn't a request. I followed him through the silent house to a room I'd never entered, one of the areas designated as private in our agreement. The security team remained outside as Victor closed the heavy door behind us. The study was different from the rest of the house, darker, more personal. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface organized with military precision. Behind it hung a painting I recognized immediately, a Francis Bacon, its distorted human figure screaming in silent anguish against a blood-red background. Victor poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses, handing one to me without asking if I wanted it. I accepted, taking a small sip of what turned out to be exceptionally fine scotch, warming my throat as it went down. "Sullivan was watching us tonight," he said, leaning against the desk rather than sitting behind it. "He's becoming more brazen." "Because of me?" I asked. "Because he doesn't believe our relationship." "Partly." Victor swirled the liquid in his glass. "He's also received new information. An informant from within my organization." "A traitor," I translated. His mouth curved slightly. "You're learning our language." "I'm adapting to survive." I met his gaze directly. "What does this mean for our arrangement?" "It means increased security. No public appearances without additional protection. No conversations about business matters, even here." He set his glass down. "It also means we need to be more convincing than ever." I thought we were already convincing. I remembered the detective's scrutiny, Sophia's skepticism. "Except to your sister, perhaps. Sophia has her own reasons for doubting me." Something dark crossed his features. "She believes I'm responsible for the failure of her first marriage." "Are you?" His eyes met mine, challenging. "Her husband was embezzling from my companies, using her to gain access. When I discovered it, I gave him a choice. Divorce or consequences. He chose divorce. And Sophia never forgave you, I guessed. She accused me of controlling her life, of being unable to allow her any happiness that didn't align with my interests." His voice was even, but I sensed old pain beneath the words. Perhaps she was right. It was the most personal revelation he'd shared, a glimpse behind the armor he wore so completely. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Sophia may approach you. Try to enlighten you about the man you're supposedly in love with." He picked up his glass again, drinking deeply. "I prefer you hear certain things from me first." "What things?" "My reputation. My business practices. The rumors about what happened to those who've crossed me." His eyes locked with mine. "Sullivan isn't the only one who believes I'm dangerous, Emma." A chill ran through me despite the Scotch's warmth. "Are you?" "To my enemies?" "Yes." The simple admission hung in the air between us. "Does that frighten you?" I considered lying, then thought better of it. "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps people alert. Alive. He set his empty glass down. But you needn't fear me. Not as long as our arrangement stands. I protect what's mine. Even temporarily. The possessive claim should have offended me. Instead, I felt an unexpected flicker of heat at his words, at the intensity in his gaze as it held mine across the shadowed room. There's something else, he continued. My grandmother has invited us for dinner tomorrow night. A small family gathering. Your sister will be there, I guessed. Along with her husband, Alessandro. My mother and her current husband. And Sullivan's boss, Captain Reynolds of the SFPD, who happens to be married to my mother's cousin. His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. Family connections are complicated in this city. A police captain related to your family? Isn't that a conflict of interest for investigations involving you? Reynolds has recused himself from anything directly concerning me. Not that it matters. Sullivan operates with considerable autonomy. Victor moved closer, his proximity sending my pulse racing inexplicably. Tomorrow will be a test, Emma. Everyone at that table will be watching for inconsistencies. 4 cracks in our story. No pressure, I murmured, taking another sip of scotch for courage. You'll need to be perfect. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face in a gesture that could have been practiced for observers but felt oddly intimate in the empty room. And you'll need to trust me. Even when things might not make sense to you. For what? I'm not sure. Something shifted in the air between us. The careful distance we'd maintained dissolved in the shadowed study, replaced by a tension that made it difficult to breathe. I should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's late. His hand dropped. The moment, whatever it had been, broken. Of course. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. I left the study feeling unsettled, confused by my reaction to his proximity. This was a business arrangement, I reminded myself. Nothing more. Any attraction I felt was merely a product of the situation, the forced intimacy, the danger, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps. Or simply the result of playing a role so completely that the boundaries between fiction and reality began to blur. Sleep eluded me again that night. My dreams, when they came, were filled with faceless threats and Victor's warnings echoing through darkened corridors. Morning brought rain battering against the windows and a message from Diana that Victor had left early for his office downtown. The day stretched before me, hours to fill with anxiety about the evening ahead. I retreated to the studio, losing myself in painting as I often did when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Hours passed unmarked until Diana appeared in the doorway. Mr. Russo called. The car will be ready at 6. I glanced at my paint-smeared hands, at the canvas where I'd been working without conscious direction, dark swirls of indigo and crimson surrounding a central figure in shadow. It wasn't until Diana left that I realized I'd been painting Victor as I'd seen him in his study, illuminated only by subtle lighting, power and isolation radiating from his stance. Disturbed by what the painting might reveal about my subconscious, I cleaned my brushes and went to prepare for the evening. Victor was already waiting when I descended the stairs at precisely 6, dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His eyes moved over me, taking in the burgundy dress I'd chosen, modest but elegant, and nodded his approval. You look tense, he observed as we walked to the waiting car. I'm about to have dinner with your family, a police captain, and your sister who clearly hates me, I replied. Tension seems appropriate. His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. They're more afraid of me than you are of them. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. In the car, he briefed me on the other dinner guests. His mother, Sophia the Elder, for whom his sister was named a former beauty now in her 60s, married to Richard Tolliver, a corporate attorney 20 years her junior. Alessandro Dacqua, Sophia's French husband, involved in international shipping. And Captain James Reynolds, late 50s, career police officer with political ambitions. My mother will be cold initially, but don't take it personally, Victor said as we approached Nob Hill. She's territorial, especially about my grandmother's affections. And Captain Reynolds? Will he be as suspicious as Sullivan? Reynolds is more politician than cop these days. He'll be cordial, observant, more interested in maintaining family peace than pursuing investigations. Victor's hand found mine, his thumb running over my knuckles in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. "Stay close to me. Follow my lead." My heart raced as we pulled up to Eliza Russo's mansion. Tonight would be different from the gala. No crowd to lose ourselves in. Nowhere to retreat. Just intimate conversation around a dinner table with people who knew Victor better than anyone. Eliza greeted us in the formal dining room, already seated at the head of the table. She looked frailer than before, her skin more translucent, but her eyes remained sharp as she took in our clasped hands. "Vittorio. Emma." She smiled, genuine warmth in her voice. "Come, sit. The others are almost here." Victor guided me to a chair beside his grandmother, taking the seat on my other side. He kept my hand in his, visible on the table, a clear statement of connection that wasn't lost on the others when they arrived moments later. The introductions passed in a blur. Victor's mother with her assessing gaze, so similar to his own. Her husband, handsome in a polished way. Sophia and Alessandro, a striking couple radiating European sophistication. Captain Reynolds, whose friendly demeanor couldn't quite mask the cop's watchful eyes. Conversation flowed with the wine, carefully neutral topics at first, then gradually shifting toward more personal territory as the meal progressed. I felt myself being observed, evaluated from all sides. "So, Emma," Victor's mother said during a lull, her voice carrying the faintest accent. "My son tells me you're an artist. Have you exhibited your work?" "Not recently," I admitted. "I took some time away from painting." "And what brought you back to it?" she pressed. I glanced at Victor before answering truthfully. "Your son. He provided a studio. Encouragement. The space to create again." "How generous," Sophia interjected, her tone suggesting otherwise. "My brother has always been inquisitive about art. And artists." Victor's hand tightened around mine. "Emma has genuine talent, Sophia. You should see her work." "Perhaps we will," Captain Reynolds said pleasantly. "At the wedding. Speaking of which, have you set a date?" The question hung in the air. Victor and I hadn't discussed this detail in our fabricated story. "Not yet," Victor answered smoothly. "Emma wished to finish her current collection first. I'm learning patience." His mother laughed, the sound brittle. "Patience has never been your strong suit, Vittorio. Not since you were a boy." "Do people change, Mama?" he replied. "Do they?" she challenged, her gaze moving between us. "I wonder." Eliza tapped her water glass lightly. "Enough, Sophia. Can't you see they're happy? That's all that should matter to a mother." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by Alessandro clearing his throat. "Emma, Victor mentioned you're originally from San Francisco. Where did you grow up?" I answered his questions about my background, conscious of how my modest upbringing contrasted with the privilege surrounding this table. Yet, as I spoke of my parents, their small business, their emphasis on education despite limited means, I saw something like recognition in Eliza's eyes. "Your parents sound like good people," she said when I finished. "Like my own. We came to this country with nothing, you know. My father worked on the docks. My mother cleaned houses for rich women in Pacific Heights." She reached across to pat my hand. "Sometimes I think Vittorio needs someone who remembers what it means to build something from nothing." The conversation shifted again, moving to business matters, city politics. I felt Victor relax slightly beside me as attention turned away from us. Under the table, his hand found my knee, a silent gesture of solidarity, or perhaps warning to remain alert. After dinner, the men moved to the library for brandy while the women remained at the table. It was an old-fashioned separation that surprised me, though Victor's eyes conveyed a clear message as he left: "Be careful." "Well," Sophia said once the men were gone. "Now we can speak freely." Her mother shot her a warning look before turning to me. "You must forgive my daughter. She's protective of her brother." "Protective?" Sophia scoffed. "I'm trying to save this poor woman from what she doesn't understand." She leaned toward me. "Has he told you what he really does? Who he really is?" "Sophia, enough." Eliza's voice was quiet but commanding. No, Nonna. She should know what family she's marrying into. Sophia's eyes bored into mine. My brother is not the businessman he pretends to be. Ask yourself why a detective follows his movements. Why people fear him. I know who Victor is, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. Do you? She challenged. Did you know about Matteo Bianchi? Or Thomas Chen? No relation to you, I assume. Both business associates who disappeared after disagreements with my brother. Speculation and rumors, Victor's mother interjected. Nothing more, is it? Sophia's voice rose. Is it speculation that fathers warn their daughters about him? That even in this city, with all its corruption, his name makes people nervous? She leaned closer. He's using you, Emma, for whatever game he's playing. And when it's over, you'll be discarded like everyone else who served their purpose. That's enough. Eliza's hand struck the table with surprising force. Not another word, Sophia. I sat perfectly still, absorbing Sophia's accusations, seeing the tension in both older women's faces. Whatever the truth was, it clearly ran deeper than I'd imagined. I love your son, I said to Victor's mother, the lie coming easily now. Whatever he may or may not have done doesn't change that. Something like respect flickered in her eyes. Love is never simple in this family. No, I agreed. I'm beginning to understand that. When the men returned, Victor catalogued the tension in the room immediately. His eyes moved from his sister's flushed face to my composed one, questions in his gaze that I answered with a slight shake of my head. Not now. The evening concluded shortly after with formal goodbyes and Eliza extracting promises for another visit soon. As we drove away, Victor waited until we were several blocks from the house before speaking. What did Sophia say to you? She mentioned some names. Matteo Bianchi. Thomas Chen. I watched his profile, looking for any reaction. She implied they disappeared after disagreements with you. His expression remained impassive. And you're wondering if it's true. Is it? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Bianchi relocated to Argentina after certain tax issues came to light. Chen's gambling debts caught up with him. He fled to Taiwan. Neither disappearance had anything to do with me. Directly. Directly? I repeated. Victor turned to face me fully. What do you want, Emma? Confession? Absolution? You knew what kind of man I was when you agreed to this arrangement. Did I? The question escaped before I could stop it. I knew you were powerful. Controlling. I didn't know you might be dangerous. He finished for me. I told you that myself. You chose not to hear it. The truth of his words stung. I had ignored the signs, the warnings, focused instead on the financial security he offered, the chance to paint again, the glimpses of humanity behind his controlled exterior. Do you want out? He asked, his voice suddenly quiet. Say the word and the car will take you back to your apartment tonight. The arrangement ends. You keep what you've earned so far. The offer surprised me. I looked at him. Really looked at the harsh lines of his face softened by shadows, at the careful distance in his eyes that couldn't quite mask something deeper. In that moment, I realized two truths simultaneously. Victor Russo was indeed dangerous, perhaps even the criminal his sister believed him to be. And despite everything, I wasn't ready to leave. No, I said finally. I made a commitment. 6 months. Relief flickered across his features, so brief I might have imagined it. Good. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we reached the mansion, Victor escorted me inside, his hand at the small of my back in what had become a familiar gesture. In the grand foyer, he paused. Thank you, he said, the word sounding foreign on his lips. For tonight. For not walking away. Why does it matter? I asked. You could find someone else. Not like you. The simple statement hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was prepared to examine. He stepped closer, his hand lifting to my face, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with unexpected gentleness. My breath caught as his eyes searched mine, looking for something I couldn't name but suddenly desperately wanted him to find. Emma, he said, my name almost a whisper on his lips. Whatever might have happened next was interrupted by the sharp ring of his phone. He pulled away, checking the screen, his expression hardening. "I have to take this," he said, "all business again. Good night, Emma." I watched him walk away, confusion and something dangerously close to longing coursing through me. This wasn't part of our arrangement. These moments of connection, the complicated emotions taking root despite my best efforts to maintain professional distance. That night, I dreamed of Victor. Not the controlled businessman, but the man I'd glimpsed beneath the armor. The one whose touch lingered on my skin even hours later. I woke tangled in sheets, breathless and unsettled, wondering if I was falling into a trap of my own making. 3 months passed in a similar pattern. Public appearances where we played our roles to perfection, private moments of unexpected connection that never quite crossed the line of our arrangement. I continued painting, producing work that surprised even me with its intensity, its exploration of power and vulnerability, shadows and light. Victor provided a steady stream of encouragement, sometimes watching me work in silent appreciation. His grandmother's condition deteriorated, leading to weekly visits that became increasingly difficult as she weakened. Through it all, the charade continued. Victor, the devoted grandson, me, the loving fiancé, our fabricated romance bringing comfort to a dying woman. Detective Sullivan remained a shadowy presence in our lives, occasionally appearing at events, watching from a distance. Victor's security tightened further, additional men stationed around the property, accompanying us whenever we left the grounds. I learned to live with the constant surveillance, to move through the world aware of potential threats I couldn't see, but Victor seemed to anticipate. Then came the night that changed everything. I was alone in the mansion, Victor away on what he described vaguely as business travel to Chicago. 3 security men remained on the property, patrolling the perimeter, while Diana had left for the evening after ensuring I had everything I needed. I was in the studio working late when the power went out. One moment the room was brightly lit, the next plunged into darkness, save for the faint moonlight streaming through the windows. I froze, brush in hand, listening to the sudden silence. No hum of electricity, no distant sounds of security's radios. Something was wrong. Victor had briefed me for situations like this, specific protocols to follow. I reached for my phone to call the emergency number he'd given me, only to find no signal. Jammed. Heart pounding, I moved silently to the studio door, peering into the darkened hallway. Nothing. I slipped off my paint-splattered shoes for quieter movement and began making my way toward the panic room Victor had shown me on the lower level. I'd nearly reached the main staircase when I heard it. The soft thud of a body hitting the floor, followed by muffled voices speaking a language I didn't recognize. Intruders. Inside the house. Past security. Pressed against the wall, I inched toward a decorative alcove that might provide temporary hiding. As I moved, a floorboard creaked beneath my foot, a small sound, but in the silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. I held my breath, calculating the distance to the nearest exit, knowing I wouldn't make it. A beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping the hallway. It was only a matter of seconds before it found me. In that moment, with strange clarity, I realized something I'd been denying for months. Whatever game Victor Russo was playing, whatever dangers surrounded him, I had become more than a temporary player in his world. Somewhere between the lies and the truths, between the performances and the quiet moments, I had fallen in love with the complex, dangerous man who had upended my life with spilled coffee and an impossible proposal. The beam of light inched closer, and I closed my eyes, Victor's name on my lips like a prayer.